Coming on YouTube. While buttons, chat things, try to handle message, chat. Switch to the view of my notes. Let's see. Give it a minute or two to see if anybody comes on. Otherwise, there's a lot to say about this topic, so I will just jump in. Alright, we have one person in here already. Reaper sees my fun subtitle here, recreational internet usage. He says, sounds like something the feds would ban. Yes. We could talk about friends and drugs too. In fact, that's a fun topic. There's actually this wordplay in Russian. So the Russian word for friend is it's kind of like drug in English. Drug, something like that. And then so like on one server I'm in, like my kind of tagline is what's it? Drug over drug. So choose friends over drugs. A joke, but true. Because there's something different about friends, right? Friends are people, and drugs is just chemical processes in your brain. This is already getting into some of the spiritual topics we might talk about. But say by like some kind of hardcore atheist sort of view, you might say that what are friends anyways? You know, it's all just chemical processes in your brain. But I mean, like personally, I don't believe that. It's not just chemical processes in your brain. There's actually other people in the world. So let's write some notes. Just chemical processes in the brain. Spelling's hard. Refuting atheism, nihilism. There is something different about people. People can be your friends, but even the internet can give you feelies. Facts over feelings. Which should not be equated with friends who may give you good feelings. A couple more comments by Reaper. Reaper says, did you write a dare essay when you were a kid promising not to do drugs? Okay, so I actually was exposed to the dare program. I don't think they ever had me write an essay. I do remember though they would give us these there were some magazines or catalogs that in the pre-internet days, like I would just thumb through sometimes because it was kind of fun. Let me see if I could actually pull it up. Let's look at this together. Before we talk about Luke Smith, let's go to Dare Drugs informational magazine. Maybe I could actually find the exact one that I remember looking through. there was like all these stories about like some kind of illustrated stories. I think when I was exposed to Dare, they didn't have this lion logo. So let's go to my demographic. I'll be in here. Yeah, maybe I'll pick it up actually next time. I probably didn't throw it away. Actually, just click really quick, see if Wikipedia brings up anything. If they got like a image or something. Cool. All right. Well, why don't we get into the topic? I think we could get started. Sounds like my technology's working, so that's good. Okay. So the title of today's stream is "The Case for Internet Friends." This is partially a reaction to a video put out by minor internet celebrity Luke Smith. So we'll pan over to here. So here's the title of his video. I wish I had more internet friends. Literally nobody. And yeah, you could go watch this video for yourself. You know, if you search this, you could find
Morning. It's actually been a while since I've done.
I don't think Luke Smith like copyrights his thing. So if I did play this, it would be fine.
On a video, and that's for a reason. I had this realization the other week, actually. I forget what I was doing in particular, but I realized, man, I've had like so much time recently.
Hey, by the way, hey Reaper, can you confirm to me if you could hear the audio from the video I'm playing, or if not, otherwise, I don't want to prolong technical difficulty pain. Okay, Reaper says the interesting non-drug related thing Dare does is it teaches you about avoiding advertising, like bandwagon advertising, showing you'll be happy if you do what other people do, like drink beer. Yeah, I actually remember this. That reminds us of like the bandwagon fallacy, even as a low-key neckbeard Sam Harris listener. I was familiar with these things, the logical fallacy. Oh, looks like they've since rebranded their website here a little bit, but like we could go to the bandwagon fallacy, which says the fallacy of bandwagon says, but everyone is doing it. The fallacy appealed to the popularity of something as a means of validating it. Right, so clearly something is not right, you know, because everybody else is doing it. Now, mind you, okay, so here we're going to get into some tinfoil waters. It's just like, you know, if I said, well, everybody knows electrical vehicles are good for the environment, does that mean that we should all be on board with electrical vehicles? Like something like that would also be an example of some way in which the establishment, whatever you want to call it, tries to get people yoked to a position via the bandwagon fallacy. All right, Reaper says, yes, in response to can we hear the audio? The video is super loud because your mic input gain is low, and I had to increase my volume more than normal. All right. I apologize for the ear assault. So I won't go step by step playing through that video. I don't think that would make for a pleasant video. Let's instead jump back to the notes and just refer to this Luke Smith video if you all did want to see it.
What's with that? Why do I have so much time? That kind of, I don't know, it should be an obvious question, but, you know, one thing that, there's an irony, many ironies in me having this YouTube channel. We all know them, so let's say them out loud. Firstly, a lot of the stuff on paper that we pretend to talk about on this channel, right, is technology. I've done many technology tutorials and stuff like that. But at the same time, when you really get into any kind of topic, technology is no exception. Unless you are just brain dead, you have to think about the implications. Like what does this thing that we're interested in cause? Like what are the I don't know, the ramifications? What are the consequences of technology, right? And I think anyone who's sane and sits down and thinks about it is very worried about the effect of technology on their life, okay? On computing, like relying too much on computers and computerization of stuff, but also the unnatural effects that things like social media, things like this have on us, right? That's something very worrisome. So ironically enough, of course, although we talk about computers and stuff, it's very important to be aware of how they affect you. And I think a person who knows, I mean, it's like, I don't know, I want to say, wasn't it like Mark Zuckerberg doesn't let his kids use Facebook and stuff like that? It's the same consequence. When you really know what these things do to people, you are not going to let you're not going to want to really participate in them, right?
All right. So that was, I just played like a minute or two of the Luke Smith here. But we could talk a little bit more in depth about this stuff. So I titled this video "The Case for Internet Friends" because partially in response to this Luke Smith video, Luke Smith makes this nice clickbait all caps title thing. I wish I had more internet friends. Literally nobody. And I think that as a sort of normative statement for most people, that is generally better. Like, it's more natural. People naturally had friends and did all sorts of things prior to the internet and all these technologies. On the other hand, we have to look at the reality of the world we live in. So most of us do not live in the woods like Luke Smith. Most of us, maybe we're trapped in some suburb. Maybe we live in the city. So there's many reasons in which you can't just go outside, start chopping logs, and meet somebody else who's like, oh, hey there, can I help you chop lumber, whatever. Like, we don't want to be delusional or given into some sort of idyllic fantasy about how we would like the world to be. So sort of normative or prescriptive for those of you who have read some intro to linguistics stuff. Prescriptive is like prescribing, telling how something should be, as opposed to looking at how stuff actually is. Versus now we see, the internet is everywhere. Like, you might have heard about people complaining about how, say, Instagrammers would ruin some hiking site or some scenic area because they just go there and take their photos. All right, we got a couple of messages here. Ripper says he is right. A lot of people think about how too much tech might affect you negatively. Almost no one makes significant changes about it. I think one area where people do is uninstalling social apps. Okay, yeah, makes sense. Mountain Walk says the feeling when an infinity amount of internet friends, I literally can't have more. Right. So we could get into this later. The human limitations. One important thing being like time and attention for how much internet friends we could have. Without getting too off the rails, in this Luke Smith video, some of the comments are pretty funny. Where's this? The one person was like, oh yeah, easy to say for a man with 167K internet friends. So there's like literally a number where you don't have time for more. For a lot of people, we could have a single male moment in this chat for all of you single males in the audience or viewing this video. If you have one wife that is very demanding, then you might have time for literally nobody because she demands a monopolizing of your time. Whereas a lot of us, we're in a position of our life where there is time to talk with more different people and to look at more different things. So non-stupid points that are being brought up here. Okay, Reaper's trying to make friends. All right, cool. We're making internet friends. Sounds cool. Okay, so let's get back though to the notes here. So let me tell you a little bit about like why I'm actually giving a little bit of pushback to the Luke Smith live in the woods view here, and some of my views on internet friends. So I'll just look at my notes here. So as my background, I wrote here, the internet was one of my main avenues in which I was able to connect with people and build friendships that have lasted beyond a school year. So for those of you who don't know, I spent a lot of time in school. I went to undergraduate, graduated with pretty high grades, but in the humanities, so not directly dumping into a career. So I went to graduate school, and then I was in graduate school for about 5 years. So I was in school, let's just say 12 years for K through 12, plus another 10. So I was in school for like 20 years. So the majority of my life I spent going to school. There's a lot that could be said about that. I personally would not recommend that to most people. It's kind of like a path of least resistance for a person that could handle it. That's kind of a funny way to say it. Like, if your personality, your talents, your disposition, it's such that you could like sit and stare at arbitrary stuff. I mean, I literally read dictionaries for fun sometimes. Okay, so that's to say, I could put up with a lot of the stuff that they make you do in school. And so the sort of path of least resistance would be to just like saying, "Oh yeah, well yeah, I read books," and go on and on and on. So I stayed in that groove for probably far longer than I should have, but you know, it is what it is. So, right. So, related to that, what I'm saying about the internet is the internet was one of the ways in which I was able to meet people, build friendships that have lasted beyond a school year, the duration of a program, or something. And this is just a descriptive fact to say that some things like our social media accounts, I'll include Gmail in there because like I've kept up internet correspondence with people. For example, maybe one of the most persistent reference points by which people may contact us. And like I'm not going to go into the details, but I'll just say that like over the past couple years, in which the most notable life event was I converted to Orthodox Christianity. There have been a number of people that I have not talked to for years that have contacted me either by my phone number, which I've kept the same for like over a decade, or my Gmail account, which I've probably had for over a decade, and you know contacted me and we had some conversations about some stuff. But this is to say, people that have not contacted me in years and years and years reached out to me through these what I call here persistent reference points. Through the internet, or in the case of the phone, the phone network. So that's to say, for me, I think that these things aren't a nothing burger. Like, one of the features of our world is not like you live in the same small local area and you're just going to run into the same people from your hometown all the time. I mean, truly, a lot of people move and live in a different town or something, but their email address might be more persistent than their physical address. So what I've seen in my own life, by my own experience, is one way in which things are resolved or people work out stuff, or you know whatever you want to call it, would actually be through internet means. All right, a couple of comments. Mountain Walk says, "Yeah, it's real. One wife or thousands of internet bros." In terms of the demands on time and attention. Humanities degree, into the garbage goes. Of course, I have a degree in history, so... Right. I will mention, though, let's add this as a note. Aside degrees. And I'll make a note about... What is STEM anyways? And I want to also highlight, let's go to info view, and let's go to the official President Biden STEM. One interesting thing, after having studied a lot of STEM, so I did degrees in the humanities, but I kind of went from humanities to social science to hard, quote unquote, hard science. So I actually do have a lot of hard science background. And one of my main conclusions is that the so-called hard science, it's just as bullshitty as the humanities stuff is. The way that it differs is the sort of domain that it's being applied to, but the idea of what you're doing is the same. So in the hard sciences, the STEM, it might be like computer systems or chemicals or something, so that the measurable quantities or the things that you're looking at could actually be more accurately quantified. But the sort of approach is the same as, say, psychology. In psychology, you're applying all these stimulus, doing all this behaviorism stuff to try to find out, like, how do people respond to some stimulus so we can apply it and do with this. It's just a different layer of granularity, not sure how to say that, by which the harder science of, say, like physics or even like biology, chemistry apply to this. Anyways, so, and this actually, hey, this is directly relevant to this discussion of friends. This whole idea of STEM. Okay, so STEM, one big thing to know about is it's impersonal. So STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, math. Can you be friends with math? No, you can't be friends with math. You can't be friends with numbers. What's engineering? It's designing systems with whatever tool set that you're working with. Like, I do engineering now in my job, working with cabinets. So I engineer like cabinet solutions. Which basically means pulling out a tape measure, measuring stuff, figuring out, like, will this door fit or will this hinge fit, something like that. Technology, and science. So in here, notice there's no friends, there's no parents, there's no Wojak or Pepe. It's just impersonal stuff. So it's like our current society, what is it that's being encouraged? What is it that's being emphasized? It's this very impersonal approach to making progress. Forgive my language for those who may not be familiar with this term, but it's like autistic in terms of like internet autistic, getting people to be fixated on these non-personal phenomena and things, invest all their time and energy into optimizing and solving problems while ignoring other people. So that's the state of our affairs, and that's why we're in a friendship crisis. So thank you all for joining the stream. Let's recognize. Let's write this down. That's pretty good. We're in a friendship crisis. The friendship is sinking. What is the best ship? One of the best ships is the friendship. The friendship is sinking. Cool. All right. Reaper says, your persistent phone number and email count are outlasting most links or even internet sites. Thus, that further cements email and phone numbers as important. Indeed, yeah, these will be some of the... that's why so many things are based on them. Like all these online services, they'll be based on your phone number or email address, whereas like you might have numerous different addresses, physical addresses that have changed. Even like billing versus shipping address, we even have that distinction. But you don't have a billing versus shipping email address, right? Cool. All right, so let's get off of this aside and go down here. Okay, so there's this persistent idea. Let's write this here. Persistent idea that some experiences are more real than others. Something like this. So by that, I'll mean people might say something like, you should live your life, get off the internet, and say interact with other people. So there is a sense in which this is true. You actually have to do stuff. It is true that you actually have to do stuff. But I think it's also true that there could be, you could be doing all the real life stuff and nobody is actually your friend, and then you actually make better friends online. So that's going to some of my early experience, saying that the internet was one of the first places in which I was really able to like connect with a lot of people and felt that people would listen to what I had to say and stuff, versus feeling pretty used and isolated in many ways in normal face-to-face interactions. So as somebody who never really like rejected or refused face-to-face interactions, it was like in my normal face-to-face interactions, I might meet a lot of people, try to become friends with people, try to do a lot of stuff, and a lot of people reciprocated. I got a lot. I'm not gonna be saying like everyone sucks, but of course with the internet, it's like casting a wider net. You would be able to meet more sorts of different people, and then find that, say, you deal with some problem or you're interested in something, that you're not alone on that. So you might find more specialized camaraderie or specialized help or specialized friendship or whatever to face a specific problem. Cool. All right. So let's go down and continue with the stuff here a bit. So, right. More for the case of why internet friends isn't just a meme, but I think it is kind of a real thing. I wrote this here. Now tons of mainstream commerce is done online. People of all sorts of ages, genders, like there's actually girls on the internet. Just this past like week or two, like I'm a single guy. So I was actually asking like a pretty normal girl, I was like, how do people meet each other these days? And it was this girl that was telling me, oh, like I met my partner online or whatever. Whereas like, I think like a lot of guys, especially knowing that going online and stuff, it's often the ratios and these things, it's like often a sausage fest online. There's a version of many guys to go online. Like, it's true. I mean, nowadays there are lots of girls on the internet. Now, I'm not advocating for or against that approach. I'm just talking about one conversation with one person and one opinion I had. But let us just acknowledge and admit, like, the internet isn't solely a place that, people go to play video games and have fantasies about stuff. The internet, as nerds will bemoan, has become the domain of the normies. Lots of just normal people go to the internet. In fact, like today I was at a coffee shop and I used cash. And I was thinking in my head, it's kind of like being the guy who chooses to use cash at a coffee shop is almost like the hipster on the fixie bike or with a vinyl record player instead of the streaming service. It's like the sort of dinosaur way to do things. Whereas if you just look at like the normies, the normal people in society, maximally using all these technologies, I would say, from my experience interacting with different people, seems to almost be the norm. Hence the word normie, the norm for doing a lot of things. And aversion to that actually, ironically, marks you as a kind of nerd. So the normal thing to do would be like to just use your smartphone and not think about internet privacy or whatever, and returning to some tradition of renting DVDs from Blockbuster or whatever you're talking about, and to just like use these things. All right, couple contents. Reaper says, Alan totally has the California surfer accent. Yes, we're internet internet surfers. Frenzy says, it's weird. Even after almost 3 years, I'm still amazed by how surfer Alan sounds. Well, glad to have you surfing the waves of the internet with me. Mountain Walk says, I get my infinite bro friends to ratio people that disagree with me over MTG. I think that's Magic the Gathering, to display my dominance. Yeah, you got to... this is basically what NGOs do. It's like you're controlling the meta game by campaigning and saying what's cringe and based or whatever, and they actually buy your input by persistent sending messages in some sphere. You could actually have an influence over stuff or what people need. So maybe you're a secret marketing genius. You just didn't know. Maybe you already know you're a marketing genius. Cool. All right, let's continue with the notes here. Okay, so to go on more for like how the internet is kind of normal. Here I have a little blurb. I'll just read it. We may have many situational friends. So I've heard this term by people like kind of complaining, like, oh, are they my real friend, or do they only talk to me because we're in the same class? It's like, there's nothing wrong with only talking to somebody because you're in the same class. You could be friends with somebody just because you share some situation, such as a same geographic area in common, and that's not a problem, okay? So, here I wrote, we may have many situational friends, people we are happy to work with and do things together with, for example, coworkers, fellow travelers. Maybe you're on a bus and... we are all the Chinese tour group. We go together on a megaphone group. You are also from the Irvine, California. Oh, you also like to eat a dim sum, right? A fellow traveler, Maybe you share preferences about what you eat, what you don't eat, whatever it is. There could be situations in which we find somebody maybe we wouldn't just go walk up to and start talking with. But because we happen to be doing the same things, you might befriend this sort of person so you could mutually help each other, classmates, so on. And I added to this, similarly, many people are imprisoned on the internet together. And so we could make friends with people that are there, meaning on the internet, because they don't have transportation, they don't have money to go places and do things, or restricted because maybe they're under the care of their parents. Maybe they're sick. They have some health thing. So there's all sorts of reasons in which, like, a lot of the autonomy I take for granted. So, like, I have a car. I could drive around, I could go on the computer whenever I want, and so on. I have all these freedoms, but I didn't always have these, right? I could remember back when I was in grade school or whatever, and I could meet people, right? For instance, like at my church, there's a lot of people who they have to take Uber and stuff. So I don't see them like every week at all the services and stuff, because one challenge they have to face is they don't have their own transportation and stuff or money to do things. And I bring this up to emphasize that this is a very normal state of affairs, or not normal, very common state of affairs, that there's a lot of people in the world that maybe you would like to meet, or that would like to meet you, but for whatever reason, they would not be able to. They cannot just simply, let's say, you're not going to randomly run into them at Starbucks or something because they don't have the money or the transportation to do that. But that doesn't mean that there's anything about them that you wouldn't like or whatever. Simply their situation is different. So for all of the above reasons, I'm saying that the sort of world that we live in now, the state of affairs that we see, there's nothing weird about starting or meeting new people or whatever, as internet friends because so much stuff has been pushed on the internet, and as more attention, time, money, and things go onto the internet, also too, there's a lot of people that are left behind in many ways. Just like you could say with the invention of the automobile, tons of stuff changed. The internet is kind of like the automobile, and being this big thing that once it was made, lots of changes have followed. All right, cool. Let's continue. So, right. So some other cases for internet friends. I think that another reason why internet friends and stuff is important is because, let's use this word here, xenophilia. Okay, so a lot of us, we know and we're familiar with what's around us, but we want to look out for something that's more. So in the past, maybe that meant getting on a ship and sailing to the new world. But in our present day, a lot of the times that might be saying like, let's go on the internet and look for a group or something that's interested in something. And this could also include, for instance, like, okay, one thing that I've shared on this channel is one of my hobbies is I'm interested in a lot of foreign languages. So I showed, like, here I have Russian and Greek, 2 languages I'm looking at now because I became an Orthodox Christian. So now I want to study languages that are used by people that are in the Orthodox Christian civilization. But I've also studied languages like, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, and so on and so forth. And really, around me, I actually rarely hear these languages. When I was at a university, I would hear Mandarin Chinese a lot because these universities would get all these people from a supposedly evil empire into the university and give them all our techniques and knowledge about science and technology. Kind of funny how that works, isn't it? So I would hear like a lot of Mandarin Chinese, but it's like, in what situation and what time and place might people talk to you, or whatever. So in order to learn about that, naturally people might go to the internet or something to sort of find out like where are the Chinese people, maybe to learn some Chinese, and so on and so forth. So as a case for the internet friends, oftentimes the internet would be the bridge by which maybe you aren't part of any group, you don't even know where they meet or anything. How would you, just some person, come to initiate yourself with some kind of group? Mountain Walk says, I can kind of speak a little Spanish. So that would be an example of where like I haven't really used the Spanish much. Like I would go around town and I would read all these signs and they would be in Spanish and English because I'm in California. So I'll know like all sorts of Spanish words and understand like tons of Spanish going around me. But how might I actually initialize myself into some sort of Spanish speaking thing? Like people I know that speak Spanish, if I just started speaking Spanish at them because my accent's not great and stuff, they might laugh at me. And they might say some stuff to me in Spanish, and it's cool. But probably we'll just default back to English because it's easier. Whereas on the other hand, like let's say I wanted to get really serious about using and knowing Spanish well, like if I went on the internet and searched for an opportunity to volunteer as like, an English language tutor for Spanish speakers, or like some language exchange type group or something like that, then naturally that would be a way in which like you could meet people with the mutual interests of like boosting certain language skills. So especially during the pandemic, we saw a lot of things being pushed to the internet, And so the relevance of kind of internet friends became boosted by that. Cool. Mountain Walk says there's actually a large Spanish-speaking population in Oregon, so I've learned quite a bit from native speakers than I did from a couple year in classes. Right. So in Mountain Walk, you're bringing up this point here where, oftentimes, it's the natural, normal way that is the easiest way to success in something. I'll relate this to internet and friendship stuff, but it's like if there's like a natural need to use and learn Spanish, then you learn Spanish like super quick, no problem. It's easy. Whereas like one mistake that I've made is I've tried to force a lot of things. So for instance, like by ethnic heritage, I'm Chinese, but actually pretty much I don't talk to very many people at all who speak Mandarin Chinese. In the past there were more, but even then not that many. So learning Chinese was always like an uphill struggle because like I'll just be honest, people could care less whether I did or I didn't actually speak Chinese. Whereas on the other hand, like now, I'll talk to a lot of people, and it's actually useful. For instance, if I understood a bunch of Russian, so even without putting in as much effort, just because there's actually a natural, normal need for me to kind of be familiar with some Russian stuff, I'll learn Russian a lot faster. And it's more memorable because I associate it with like people and things people are asking for, and so on and so forth. Versus trying to study Chinese for many years, it was just like honestly, it didn't matter. It was just like me trying to force people to speak Chinese with me, I guess. So that kind of didn't go as well as I wanted it to. All right, Frenzy Friend says, I imagine that here in Antwerp, there's probably a decent-sized French-speaking population, but I don't really come across them. And then he mentions he's had his Gmail account for quite a while. Yeah, and he says he doesn't come across his French speakers, right? So as an example of this, like suppose you really like something, like you really liked French playwrights or something. So naturally, you would probably go on the internet to search for some information. Maybe you'd buy a book. Maybe you'd email the author of a book. And so the internet would be this medium by which you might connect with this French thing that you might not connect with otherwise. So here, yeah, reaching outward xenophilia. That's the subtitle I'm offering here. And here, just one note I wrote here. Note the word xenophobia doesn't get spell checked, but the word xenophilia does. So our overlords on the internet, they're always trying to put a negative hate spin on stuff. Like, why is the word xenophilia spell checked, meaning it's uncommon, not something people use, but then xenophobia is there? It's because the bad guys are always saying like, oh, you're being xenophobic, blah, 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 blah. It's like, why don't we just talk about how some people are more like into their own local community and other people are more outward looking? We don't have to express these things in accusatory terms. We could just talk about how, different people are different, and we could help the xenophilic people, get access to and be able to help other people and reach out and bring new things in their communities. And then the people that aren't as xenophilic, we don't have to call them xenophobic. We could just say, yeah, I mean, they're minding their own business, and that's cool. Mountain Walk says, did Alan just say he was going to read Journey to the West in Ancient Chinese on stream? Oh man, if I had some funding or other motivation, I might try that. Let's switch over to the browser view. One thing I was actually surprised about, I looked up this Journey to the West because I had a friend that was interested in it. I was surprised at how a lot of these so-called classics are actually fairly new. So I'm just going to pull up Wikipedia here. 西游记. Okay, so look. Is a Chinese fantasy novel published in the 16th century. That's a 16th century, dude. Like, what was going on in the 16th century? So, would you pull up this, like, Chinese fantasy novel, which it means it's about stuff that's, like, fake and gray. It's not even real. Whereas, like, what else was going on in the 15th century or 16th century? So, according to Wikipedia, our official establishment narrative, Michelangelo returns to his native Florence to begin working on the David statue. Safavid dynasty reunifies Iran. Zheng De emperor ascends the throne of the Ming dynasty. Martin Luther, Protestants going crazy. So all sorts of stuff that was going on. So it's like, of all the things to look at in the world, why would you look at, like, what Chinese people made up so they could feel good? I don't know. It's kind of weird. Yeah, Mountain Walk says it's younger than Shakespeare. Yeah, this is one of the big red pills that I had learning about East Asian languages, because sort of my academic journey was I started studying like Chinese, Japanese, Korean because I have East Asian heritage. And then basically I was like, wait, a bunch of this stuff was actually just made up in the 20th century, and it's not popular for a reason. There's a reason why people are talking about like French and German more. It would be because it's culturally relevant because of like the Protestant Reformation and the cultures and stuff in the United States. It's not that all cultures are equal and, you should just, listen to K-pop all day or something. It's actually like some cultures are more influential than others. Some ideas have had a bigger impact. And so there's this huge artificial boost at like ethnic this or that in the world for whatever reason. All right, cool. So, yeah, none of this though is to say that like that there's nothing to learn from China or Japan or whatever. Just to go off this red pill a little bit, let's just to say like, okay, there's a huge like praise of Japanese craftsmanship in the West, for example. So let's just search Japanese craftsmanship. And then you're probably going to get, tons of hits of like beautiful aesthetic images about, how these Japanese, they make these great, wood joints that don't use nails. And, this object of this obese doll thing, some bamboo, whatever. So it's like, obviously, just look around for a little bit. There's a huge emphasis on like the expertise of the material culture of East Asia. Just now, like how yoga and stuff is getting shilled hard. Like you could call that like Far Eastern spirituality, whether through New Age or even more like one guy I like to bash on a lot is Sam Harris and his meditation shilling. A secular Jewish man trying to get everybody to LARP as a Buddhist. So there's definitely certain things that are being shilled hard. And you could ask, like, why is this Japanese stuff being pushed hard? Like, do you think that people, for instance, in Bulgaria don't have, like, a long tradition of good craftsmanship? Why aren't we talking about like castles in Romania? Why aren't we talking about like various ways in which like Greek people preserve vegetables or something like that? It's because, right, going back to the internet and this internet marketplace, there's certain people, certain groups that like push certain threads, and you could choose to participate to become parts of those groups. and people will gather and find and meet each other around some of those groups. Cool. All right, Reaper says, who said there's nothing to learn from Japan, Germany, or France? The Nazis. That's who, Reaper. The Nazis said. You can't learn anything from them. Right. Cool. I'm going to flip back to my notes. Let's go back to the notes. Okay, so in terms of internet friends, let me just make a couple comments. I think more so than like online or offline friends, an important distinction we could make when talking about talking or communication is so-called synchronous versus asynchronous. So right now, all of us here, we're gathered together through a platform, YouTube, and we're engaged in a kind of synchronous communication. There might be lag to some extent, like maybe I'll say something and then 5 seconds later you'll hear it. But it's kind of negligible for the purposes of this conversation. Versus asynchronous. Asynchronous is like I send my friend a text, hey, are you free at 1:30? And then, they might read it 2 hours later or something. I don't know. There's like this, that in the communication, it would be different from if I picked up my phone and I called somebody right away. That would be a way of trying to force synchronous communication. So I think that one thing we've seen on the internet that's evolved over the past 10 years or so is the mainstreaming of synchronous communications for the internet. So for a while, only the asynchronous was really possible. Think of like people typing and arguing on forums and things like that, or newsletters, stuff like that. It would be like letters, but just in a digital medium. So for a long time, the internet was only the domain of asynchronous communication and could be compared to like written correspondence in many ways. Now, what we're seeing in the past, especially few years, is an explosion of the smoothness of the synchronous communication. So say what you might about services like Zoom, for instance. I mean, Zoom has mainstreamed like video conferencing in a way that, like, I remember, like, I used Skype back in the day, including for like tech interviews or whatever. Skype was more like, oh, okay, this might work, this is pretty good, but you wouldn't just talk with somebody and expect them to have Skype up and running. It would almost be like, hey, like, let's all just sort of check our Skype and see if it's working and stuff like that. Whereas I know there's tons of people that will just be like, oh yeah, just hop on Zoom. I'm like, my company that I currently work at, they have like Zoom meetings all the time, almost daily. And there's people that are working here that you wouldn't call like techie in any sort of like normal way in which people talk about like digital technology enthusiasts. Yet the synchronous communication technology, Zoom, is completely mainstreamed. Cool. So right now what we're seeing that's different is synchronous versus asynchronous communication. And what we're seeing on the internet is a big opening and explosion of synchronous communication. So what does that have to do with internet friends? I think that one of the criticisms that people would have about like being on the internet all day or like doing internet stuff would be what they would call like the lack of real communication, stuff like this, which I think sometimes is more of it's kind of a misunderstanding of the media, the digital media, of synchronous versus asynchronous communication, among other things. So for instance, like if you did a job interview and you had to do it on Zoom or Skype, would you tell somebody, oh, you didn't actually do a real job interview because you did it online? Like, I know there's people who watch my stream who now work remote jobs. They might have been like interviewed remotely, and now they might make like, more money than me, like all remotely. That would be a completely sort of normal thing, and that sort of situation would involve being able to respond to situations, to be able to be successful at synchronous communication. So it's like if only you replied doing emails and you could always do things on your own times and your own terms, that would be asynchronous. And I could say how, yeah, you're definitely missing something out if you're never doing anything synchronous. But if you're being interviewed or you have to call up a client or do whatever, making phone calls, then yeah, you're being given like synchronous demands. So the sort of internet friends, in the sense like if all you did was watch YouTube videos and commented on YouTube videos, that would be having a life of only asynchronous communication, where it's like you do everything on your terms. You only watch a video when you feel like it, or reply to it when you feel like it. That's asynchronous communication, and that would be different from like synchronous communication. So like one thing, for instance, why I like these streams, why I do these sometimes, is saying like, there might be a bunch of people that are just on their computer, whether they're working, taking a break, or figuring something out, that would just like to talk to some people. Then let's engage in some synchronous communication. That's cool. And we could do it now in this day and age because of the technologies and stuff we have available, whereas in the past it would not be so possible. Cool. Reaper says, people argue on forums. Tell me more. Yeah. So I'll just go into this topic a little bit. This is funny. Arguing on forums. Let's say that through asynchronous technology, disputes are not limited by time. Let me elaborate on what I mean by that. So here, if you wanted to argue with me, it would be restricted to the sort of the time duration of this conversation and the amount of time that you walk away from the conversation seething and angry because you got owned at a debate. Just kidding. Whereas on the other hand, these like asynchronous technologies, we'll use Reddit as an example. You could say compare with Reddit argument that goes on for pages and pages. Nerd reads at Denny's on phone for hours. So arguing on forums and things like that, it's like, because of the asynchronous nature of it, think about it like a pile, a heap for you data structure nerds. And you could just heap on thing and thing and thing and thing to look at. So it's like, instead of saying, here, pay attention to this, and then if you didn't hear me, then it's kind of gone. The danger of the asynchronous stuff is that because of the nature of it, it's just like if you have an email inbox that fills up to 10,000 messages. With these asynchronous channels, if you don't have a good way of dealing or managing with it, what could happen is that they pile up and they expand such that you either declare what I've heard called like email bankruptcy, which basically means you just ignore your email and you have 10,000 messages, or you have some like policy or management thing to make sure that you actually do it. But there's like a lot of people in graduate school, I met these people that would just be like overwhelmed by their asynchronous communication channels. For instance, let's say you're a teacher assistant for a class, and you're like, oh, students, you could contact me about anything, anytime. And then you just get student email after student email. This person might be like, oh, it's Saturday, I woke up and I have like 20 messages to respond to. It's sort of like this person got owned by asynchronous technology because they set them up so that they could just get like all these requests, and if like they actually feel burdened or obligated to reply to them because they had yoked themselves to some commitment of that kind, they're in trouble. Now, let me tell you all, if any of you guys land teaching gigs or something, the pro tip for student emails, the pro tip is this. Tell students, I will not look at your email unless you write a subject line for your email in a very specific format. And you could list this on your syllabus or whatever. So you could say, like, list course number, semicolon, question, semicolon, student, last name. So, like, if I was like, linguistics 001, what is language, Wong, then I would look at their email and be happy to answer the question. But if they didn't take the time and the effort to even follow this instruction to do this right, then you would tell them, I'll just ignore what you have to say. And when I did that, basically I got like very few email inquiries, and I enjoyed lots of weekends because I managed the asynchronous communication problem. So you too, now you have this nice hack if you're ever put in a similar situation. Cool. Reaper says, but in all seriousness, people arguing on the internet might be a measure that people have a lot they're trying to figure out about the world, and typical IRL manner subdues this discussion. And Mountain Walk says, I do get sucked into debates with dishonest, dumb people on Reddit occasionally. Yeah, to a Reaper, to this question, I would say, saying, don't have a good subtitle. Let's just make a new one. Internet asynchronous discussions, such as Reddit. To this, I would say you get different people do different stuff on the internet, and offline too. Some people are not there to learn. So some people truly, they go on the internet, they're not there to actually find out about the world or anything. They just want to broadcast what they have to say. So for this sort of thing, we could copy Reaper's comment, put it up here. Whoa, weird box thing. Default style quotations. Right, so there are some people that might be on the internet and looking around and engaging in conversations because they actually might want to learn. I think one key thing to do this is like, let's write this point that people that are interested in learning, people who are interested in learning will not feel compelled to speak. They can just look, listen, etc. Whereas, like, if you would go up to some community and just be like, no one's being helpful, nobody's helping me, so on and so forth. If the person that's saying something like that, like, for instance, if they had a book recommended to them and they never looked at the book, or they had some resources pointed to them and they never looked at those resources, then how serious does that person seem about actually trying to figure out things about the world? And you do get a lot of people who are just interested in like participating in an activity such as arguing or debating and so on and so forth, not to learn more, to have their own views sorted out or see if what they believe works or doesn't work, but because they want to engage in that very activity of debating. So for like politics type stuff, you might have this a lot. Like I've had people try to start political discussions with me, like, let's say, well, let me tell you about like Russia and Ukraine or something. And it's like, if you actually had good primary source news or something, I might actually hear what you have to say to like learn more about what's going on in this situation. But if you just quote like, you know, the Atlantic, the New York Times, and U.S. News, Associated Press, and say like, oh, and here's why I'm right and I'm seeing this correctly, then it's just like there's no discussion to be had. It's like you clobbled together a bunch of assumptions you have at the world based on what you heard. But why would I want to listen? Are you telling me to do something? Are you saying, therefore, donate money to Ukraine? Like, what's your point, right? Whereas, like, if somebody just straight up came up to me and they asked me, like, hey, you know, like, this person I know in Ukraine is, like, affected by this. Can you give him some money? Then I'd just be like, yeah, sure, I'll give him some money. So, on the one hand, the first person, you know, they're trying to use the internet and use a debate to do something else. And then in the second case, someone is just asking for something simple and normal. Let's relate this back to the topic. So that will have to do with internet friends. So what are the cases? What are the uses for internet friends? And as practical applications, I've listed a handful of points. So I'll go into these, and then I'll talk really quick about some orthodox stuff. But let's just say how to use the internet, why I don't dismiss like internet friendship or internet friends or doing stuff on the internet. So things to do if you're serious about using the internet. So the first one I have listed here is give money to people, projects that you think are doing something valuable. There's the old line, oh, you know, for the price of a cup of coffee, you know, you could support this channel, blah, blah, blah. And note, I'm not shilling for myself because this channel isn't even monetized. So you can even donate to it if you wanted to. At this point, you could like, subscribe. Half kidding. But that's to say, like, okay, if you want to see more of some sort of behavior in the world by choosing to actually sacrifice something, and giving money is a form of sacrifice, then it's like planting a seed. You could actually see more of it. So for instance, like if somebody, they're thinking, let's say they're really interested in history, okay? Ancient Greek history. If you had this person and they're actually getting, let's say something kind of modest, like $2,000 a month. If somebody is actually really getting $2,000 a month, it might not even be that much to start. But then that person might seriously think, like, I don't actually have to work a wagey day job. I could actually be full-time doing stuff related to ancient Greece or something. And I could make that a career and work on that and do that and provide people with this content that would not otherwise exist. So what I'm saying is, like, more so than voting, you know, it's, oh, get out, vote, blah, blah. It's like more so than voting, like just freaking give somebody $5 a month if you actually want to see them continuing what you're doing. If you listen to somebody, let's say for like 3 hours a week, and you're not even willing to give them $5, like what kind of relationship is that? And I'll note too, like one cool thing about YouTube and a lot of these internet technology stuff that's rising is that it's becoming easier and easier to show your support in various sorts of ways like this. So it's like the things you want to succeed, you could actually give people money to show that you're serious about it, or like rethink your own life, your own priorities, your own time commitments. If somebody's content is seriously not worth like $5 a month and you're watching it for 2 hours every day, let's say like some YouTube streamer or something, then maybe you should not even like watch it. On the other hand, it could go the other way too. Like for instance, there's like a YouTuber I started giving like $5 a month or something. I don't even watch this guy's content anymore, but I just think what he's doing is kind of cool. So I was like, oh yeah, you know, I'll give you $5 a month, Kind of like how I might invest in a stock. Only it's not a stock. It's like an actual person, and they're doing something. I might, give them $5. Because if nobody gave them $5, then it would never work. But if like 100 people decide to do the same thing that I did, then then this person actually could do it full time, something like that. All right, cool. Another practical thing here. Don't give into the so-called dark patterns, and instead use services like social media to your benefit. For example, don't share news stories from shadowy third parties, but instead share official news from people and groups you care about and are directly involved in. So this point that I'm making here, this is related to like all that stuff about like, let's search Facebook whistleblower, stuff like this. So the news tries to blow up all these stories like this. Let's just look at this person. What we need to know about the Facebook whistleblower. The former Facebook employee whose leaks triggered some of the most intense scrutiny in the company's history revealed her identity Sunday night. Okay. Ooh. Frances Haugen, a former Facebook product manager with stints at several other big tech companies, went public with an appearance on 60 Minutes. Blah, blah, blah. Disillusioned at Facebook. So, worked on civic integrity, including issues related to democracy and misinformation. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so all that sort of thing. Basically say, it's like, just ignore it. Like, why would you use Facebook? To talk to boomers, okay? Like, you should have friends that are boomers. It's cool to have friends that are of different ages, generations above you, generations below you, peers of around the same age group, male friends, female friends, whatever. Just like you could make friends with all sorts of people. So if you're serious about using the internet, just think of the practical value. Like, in what way is Facebook useful for me? One way it could be useful is like having a group of, say, like your local apartment complex even, right? And you could say, like, let's just have a group for our apartment complex so we could address issues together. Like, there's this sketchy guy outside doing this and this. If you see him, tell him to not piss in the dumpster or something. Whatever it might be. Just look at the services, see what they could do for you, and don't listen to the rabble rousers that are talking about these dark patterns, algorithms, how they might manipulate people. If you start believing and paying attention to the stuff that leads to that, then you give power to it. Just like if you go on, say, Instagram to look for what to buy. Just say, I'm bored, I'm going to scroll through Instagram to look for what to buy. Then yeah, of course, Instagram's going to be influential in your life in deciding what you buy and what you don't buy. But if you're like on Instagram, I post pictures and I talk with friends, then that'll be what it is. Oh, and if your friend sends you a link, you'll look at your link, but you don't like scroll through the feed thing. Probably a lot of the people that make most money on Instagram, something like that, they probably kind of use it that way. Like when they're scrolling, it's probably for market research, and then they probably just like do it or use it. Mountain Walk says, Alan peeing in dumpsters. He's speaking from experience. Now look, I've seen my share of dumpster fires, but why would I get up on a dumpster to piss? I'll just go on the wall next door. Reaper says, just sent you $10 Starbucks e-gift to your email. Well, if you're serious, then that's pretty gangster, dude. Thank you. That's cool. Okay. Let's go finish a couple of these points. Okay. For the vast majority of people, disregard all the internet privacy stuff. If there's something you want to hide that you do on the internet, stop doing it rather than looking for a Harry Potter cloak of invisibility. So I made this relatable to millennials and Gen X by mentioning Harry Potter. Now this statement is relatable. So similarly, how like here I bring up this whole thing about Facebook whistleblower algorithm, freaking out about that stuff and how people make that a big deal. On the other hand, you could look at like internet privacy type stuff, and there will be tons of it, especially like these VPN services, things like that. People make a huge big stink about internet privacy because there's industries, businesses that are around this. Now, as my practical suggestion, I say things to do if you're serious about using the internet. I say to disregard the internet privacy stuff. That would be the same way to saying like, would you refuse to use a supermarket's rewards program or coupons or something like that, because they track your data of what you purchase? You'll be like, no, if they'll give me discounts for what I'm going to purchase, like I'll take it. Like I don't care if you see how many corn husks I buy or whatever. Mountain Walk says, should it be Frodo's cloak of invisibility versus the Harry Potter cloak of invisibility? No, we're not returning to tradition at this point. We're heading into the future. We're in the early 2000s zone. Sorry, boomer walk. Cool. All right. And then my last point here, besides disregard the internet privacy stuff, is consider the internet like a shop front or a public square. So this is kind of related to about the internet privacy stuff. I continue. Rather than a private space, which you have yourself with your family and your friends and stuff, maybe even just your car, whatever. The internet is where to go to look for new connections, find new opportunities, etc. So a lot of people, I think, on the internet, they try to carve out like their own safe space. So we could write that. People try to carve out a safe space on the internet. For example, Discord server where everyone agrees with you. And there might be a time and a place to have that, like a friend group you keep in contact with. But really, a lot of that stuff, that might just be like your family and your friends. Don't try to make like Twitter your safe space. Like this is silly stuff. I found, talking here about this like shop front, public square, internet privacy. I mean, okay, well, let's just talk frankly about some of this stuff. Okay, a lot of the times people talk about like privacy, hiding on the internet and stuff like this. Might be for reasons like, you look at weird porn on the internet and you don't want people to discover. So you try to use these tools and talk about internet privacy as like a cope. So you could be in your own little like internet purview space and like do stuff yourself. Or like, you want conversations and stuff to be secure or whatever because, you're rude to people on the internet and you want to get away with it. I mean, I'm just being honest too, saying some of this stuff too, like from my own experience as well, saying like when have been the times where like I've fallen into that sort of thinking or that sort of ideas. The reasons why people might like try to want to hide or like collapse into a little digital place might be because in many ways they feel bad about themselves and what they're doing, so they're trying to cope instead of addressing the problem outright. They're trying to use and change the internet as a cope. So like as a public example, all these blue checkmark Skittles people, I mean there's like very visible physical manifestations, so they're like an easy target for people to look at and like beat down and stuff. But like don't give into the media attention too. lashing out and beating on those people too. It's just like in the Bible, right? Don't cast the first stone, right? You could say firmly like this is good, this is bad, if you know something to be good or know to be bad, but don't give into internet dog piling stuff. And that's like one thing that I would say the bad guys, the establishment, stuff like that, actually want you to do. So it's just like if you're literally in the shop front or the public square, and then people were like publicly accusing someone, oh, that person stole a candy bar, blah blah blah. If you wouldn't like literally cast the first stone out in the public square, then don't do it either on the internet. You could even reach out to that person and say like, hey, I used to have a problem with stealing, but really it doesn't do anybody any good anymore. So instead of pirating that DVD, here, I'll buy it for you on Amazon. You can watch it. Hey, actually, you don't even need to watch movies. Like, just talk to people and do stuff. It's way more interesting than watching movies. And so on and so forth. Right. Mountain Walk says, if we are saying something we wouldn't say in front of a priest, then should we really be doing it? Yeah. So that's like another thing. I think for a lot of people, the internet has become kind of like a cloak, where it's like on the internet, if you would do all these things that normally you wouldn't do, then you could ask, maybe is the internet being a problem for me? So let's just come full circle and say, so what is the case for the internet friends? I think Mountain Walk, your comment here, I think that was a good kind of summary of it. Say, the case for internet friends is basically just the same for any friends. It's just like you might meet friends like, I don't know, going to a drive-in diner. In the same way now, all of society is kind of a drive-in diner with the internet. So we could use the best of the internet. We could use the internet where it's useful. Just like, for instance, if you drove to your friend's house, would that make you like a bug man or a weirdo or like a soy boy or a loser? Because instead of running, like you drove a car. Instead of running 30 miles, you drove a car 30 miles. Like nobody's gonna seriously say that is the case. So in a similar way with the internet, we live in this world. The internet's everywhere. A lot of people limit it and how they could get around and stuff, especially as prices and costs for all sorts of stuff go up. Like we're in a pretty crazy time, and the internet's there, and it's something to use. And I personally do not think it is like it is not necessarily helpful, good, or right to unnecessarily hate on, bash on the internet, or say that, like, for instance, friends aren't real friends because they're internet friends or something like that. Instead, we, as a collective project, we could all think together about how we could best use the internet together, and also too, like, what are its limitations. I think that one of the best, biggest, most powerful uses of the internet, for instance, let's say like Facebook groups, would be that people would meet each other, get together on the internet, and then coordinate the logistics for like where to meet face to face, and then they'll keep contact with people like maybe in a different state or something, maybe even ship each other stuff. But it's a kind of like both and. So it's like you have internet friends and they're real life friends. They're both internet and real life friends. Like, what's the problem? On the other hand, you might have people you met on the internet you would really like to meet face to face someday, but you haven't had the opportunity. It doesn't mean that they're not your real friend because you met them on the internet. Just like I haven't used like online dating, but just an example, it's like if you met someone on one of these things and they're like, you've been talking and they're saying, okay, we're going to meet up at this time in this place. Do not have a date because the appointment is booked online. It's like, no, if I order a burrito with my Chipotle app, I'm going to have my Chipotle burrito. I might do that after the stream. Who knows? Getting kind of hungry. All right, couple closing comments here before we wrap up. Okay, Reaper says, talk about why people use to treat internet friends as not the same as real friends and what that means about society's adoption of technology. And Mountain Walk says, internet is just a tool like a screwdriver. Depends on how it is used. Yeah, great. I'll address Mountain Walk's point first. So going to my notes here, forgot to talk about this. So the Orthodox saints and technologies. I actually learned the saint that I'm named for, Saint Porphyrios. Now he's kind of unofficially the saint of technology. One thing that he would do is he would like hear confessions and talk to people over the telephone a lot. And there's a lot of people who claim miracles through him, indirectly through technology and stuff. So what I thought was cool about this is like, you could say he's kind of like the total war in the sense of like spiritual war. He's the total war saint in which he's even willing to use like soy tactics, like use technology in order to reach people. So there's a lot of virtues. Would be like, if you think you're too good for the internet or phone call, you won't even use it to talk to somebody. Would that be demonstrating generosity, charity, or even condescending? Not in the sense of like looking down on somebody. Condescending, like we'll use this in the sense like, if you were talking to a kid, do you talk to a kid in the same way you talk to an Oxford professor? You know, probably not, right? On this stream, you know, I'm talking to my dude bro California accent, but if I was talking to people that I would expect wouldn't like that or wouldn't understand that or something like that, then it would be appropriate for me not to take the same approach. So similarly, we could see how technology is a similar thing. Cool. All right, Reaper. So let's look at Reaper's thing. Says, and let me put this at the end of the notes. Okay. Yep. Nope. Did that not work? I think I was trying to paste. Maybe it pasted white text from dark mode. Let's try again. Okay. Reaper says, talk about why people use internet friends as not the same as real friends and what that means about society's adoption of technology. I mean, okay, I'll just say, from my own experience, I think that a lot of people that would make these distinctions, many people that would make these distinctions are people who have already succeeded without using the internet. For example, somebody who met their spouse offline might distinguish offline and online dating or matchmaking. And the reason would be because, you know, they know from their experience they did it in this one way. They don't know anything about online if they didn't do it. Or like their experience might be, let's say they tried online, but then ultimately the person that they wind up with, that they marry, that they found through traditionally offline methods, they might make such a distinction in order to recommend what worked for them. Likewise, somebody who say, you know, someone who already easily gets along with their classmates or coworkers may never have had the need to meet people online. On the other hand, a lonely computer science student might have only talked with online friends for 2 years while getting a degree. and may value these people as a support network. So this is, say, like, depending on people's experience too, like, let's not be dismissive if one person is strong pro use of internet or against internet. You know, I think a lot of people could speak earnestly or honestly from their own experience, and nobody's lying or deceiving or even like shilling. It's more just like people are saying like what's worked for them. And if, you know, somebody's talking about something that hasn't worked for them, then, you know, take what they say with a huge grain of salt, because they might not know what they're talking about. But I think, you know, a lot of people who might have some preference one way or the other for how to do things, you know, we're all different people, come from different generations, places, whatever. And people will, I think, if they're really trying to help you, right, they'll just speak from their own experience, which they know. Cool. Mountain Walk says, Chipotle or death, quote from me, and surfs up. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I mean, that about does it for this stream. I think I covered all the topics I was aiming to cover. So I thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed this synchronous experience for those of you who are watching this as it is being streamed, and for those of you who are not watching this as it is being streamed, enjoy the asynchronous wave.